Welcome. I'm Larry Olsen, and this is the Brain Vault Podcast. Did you know that the thoughts you're thinking right now are shaping the life you'll live tomorrow? Well, in this podcast, we just don't talk about mindset. We decode the blueprint behind behavior, performance, and possibility. This is where science meets real-world strategy, and your brain stops running on autopilot. If you're ready to turn default thinking into intentional living, you're in the right place. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for investing your time. Let's talk about individuals that are running, owning organizations and those that want to get to the next level. And I want to start out with this. Most founders don't fail because they lack talent or ambition. They fail because the business outgrows the nervous system running it. Now think about that. I want to welcome all of you to Brain Vault Podcast, where science meets success. And my guest today, Fleet Maull, works with overwhelmed founders and scaling entrepreneurs who've done everything right, built the company, hit the numbers, survived the grind, yet find themselves stuck in their survival mode long after the danger is past. With more than 25 years as a business strategist and founder of multiple mission-driven ventures, including an Inc. 5,000 company, Fleet saw a pattern most growth advisors ignore. You can't scale to the next level with the same leadership operating the system that got you here. So he built something different. A high-impact MBA program for bootstrapped entrepreneurs designed to break the 6 to 7 and 7 to 8 figure bottlenecks by recalibrating how leaders think, delegate, and sustain momentum. But Fleet brings an uncommon edge. He's also a globally respected meditation teacher, deeply trained in Zen and Tibetan traditions, and the creator of neuro-somatic mindfulness, a powerful synthesis of contemplative practice and modern neuroscience, which we'll get to know much more about. Fleet's work helps leaders scale not just their companies, but their inner capacity to lead with clarity, vision, and endurance. And if you've ever felt like your business is succeeding faster than you are, this conversation may be exactly what your brain and your leadership has been waiting for. Welcome, Fleet, to the Brain Vault Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Great to be here.
We're looking forward to it. I've got a starter question for you.
Okay.
You know, Fleet, in your experience working with high-performing founders, what's the biggest internal shift that has to happen for someone to move from the survival mode operator to true CEO-level leader? And why do so many people miss it?
Well, Larry, I think it's really, we're talking about CEOs, founders, business owners here, that specific application. But what's behind your question really impacts all of us. It's the human condition. We have an operating system that's hardwired for survival, right? Our ancestors were optimized to be paranoid and hypervigilant, because that's what it took to survive. That we lived in a world without the protection of our homes and cars, and there were large predators around that would enjoy us for one of their meals. And even in the times when there aren't so many human beings around, so we weren't so much worried about other human beings as we were about large predators. But then, of course, it got to where there was conflicts among humans as well. But nonetheless, we're optimized, genetically optimized that way. Fortunately, we're also genetically optimized for connection, because you don't survive on your own, right? So you survive by being part of a fam, clan, a tribe, and so forth, some kind of group. And so we have both those things going on, and there often can be those parts of our nervous system can actually be somewhat in conflict with each other. And we want connection, but we find it too triggering. It triggers us back into survival mode, right? And then we respond in a way that actually creates disconnection with others, right? So we all have that in the background. And most of us have not, in our upbringing and our education, have been introduced to skills for managing our own nervous system, for healing it, for managing it, for optimizing it. That's just not really taught in mainstream education. And so we have whatever level of a workable nervous system that we have, and we get into business with some success, and that just raises the ante on everything. And in the different stages of a business, when we move from a six-figure business to a seven-figure business, or from $1 million to a $3 million to a $10 million and beyond, we get into eight-figure businesses. The same mindset and the same skill set cannot succeed in leading those different businesses at those different stages. They require completely different sets of knowledge, different mindsets, and really, uh, the bar is raised for how upgraded and optimized our nervous system needs to be, because the ante has been raised. The potential for great success is there, but also the potential for disaster is there. And even if we've already had, you find ourselves successful, but we're still operating on a survival mode. Well, that can be the case even when business is going really well, but no business goes really well all the time, right?
Mm.
Inevitably, the market changes, competition arises, things change, and we got to be able to respond to that as leaders, right? And so, for all of us human beings, leaders or not, we're at any given point, we're either kind of on the balls of our feet in relational mode, from our responding to life's challenges from our best self, right? In polyvagal terms, Stephen Porges' work, he calls it having your social engagement system online. So we're either there, or to one degree or another, we're back on our heels in fear and survival reactive mode, right? So we're either in responsive relational mode or fear and survival reactive mode. And most of us are kind of going back there, back and forth all the time. And for some of us, it takes more intense kinds of triggers and challenges to trigger us back into fear and survival mode, and for some less. But if you're a leader with responsibility for a business, there's going to be lots of things going all the time that can trigger us into that mode. And we're amazingly adaptive as human beings, scarily so in some ways, because we adapt to just about anything, and our brain literally adapts and develops neural pathways and habit patterns and coping skills and so forth. So we can actually learn to some degree how to successfully run a business from fear and survival mode.
Mm.
But that's only
Constantly
going to take
with the
us so far. It's only
constantly
going
with
to
the
take us so.
cortisol drip going on.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Constantly having the cortisol drip going on.
Yeah, constantly, right? And
Yeah.
we can go a certain, we can have a certain level of success that way, but at some point, we'll just be in overwhelm. We'll be so depleted, our adrenal glands will be shot, and we just will not be able to be at our best. And the scale of the challenges of running a bigger business will just become too much for us, and we'll start, in most cases, we'll start coping with that through not so great coping skills, whether it's consuming substances to take the edge away, or whether it's overeating or whatever it is. And then also we'll find ourselves leaking negative energy. Sometimes we're careful about not leaking it into our business, so it leaks to our family. And then sometimes we lose the ability to maintain that boundary even with our business, and it starts leaking into our business and impacting our team and so forth. So all that is inevitable unless we first, the foundational thing is to first learn that we have a nervous system and what it is and how impactful it is on our moment-to-moment experience. Then learning the basic skills for regulating our nervous system, and then learning how to optimize our nervous system, right, for higher and higher levels of human performance. So this is just an absolutely critical aspect, and it's wonderful that that's really the focus of your podcast, because it really is where the rubber meets the road for all of us in life, but especially if we decide to take on the challenge of owning and leading a business.
And how often do you see, I know you're familiar with that concept, the Peter principle, and what's behind that,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
people reach their highest point of incompetency. Do leaders get to the point where they recognize, they falsely say to self, I guess I'm not able to handle this. I don't have this is way beyond me, and kind of discount the fact that it's just a lack of awareness, not that because they can learn the skills. but they end up adapting to this high stress level, which has got to bleed over into everything else. And you mentioned sometimes they're not even really aware of the nervous system. I believe you can't tell anyone into high performance. And as a leader and teacher, trainer, and consultant that you are as well, how do you get them? What do you do to help them discover their own nervous system?
Mhm. Well, as business owners and founders, we will inevitably find ourselves reaching the level of our incompetence. That's just kind of the pathway, right?
You
And
bet.
it may take us a while to realize that, and it may require getting feedback from our team or just feedback from the marketplace, right?
Sure.
And we may get defensive about that for quite a while. We may dismiss it. We may not believe it, but sooner or later, the handwriting will be on the wall. And if we don't pay attention to the early signs of it, it'll start impacting the bottom line, and then we'll be forced to pay attention to it, right? So, and yeah, it does begin with awareness, and so I think as a consultant, as an executive coach, as a trainer, really the first thing when I am working with business owners, CEOs, founders, is that I've done my own work and I do my own work on a regular basis. I spend the first 2.5 hours of my day every day on nervous system optimization. That's real dedication
For
to that.
yourself.
It starts the minute I wake up in bed, and
Gotcha.
I'm working with all kinds of skills, yoga and stretching and breath work and visualization and affirmations and tapping, emotional freedom technique and meditation and all different forms of meditation. I spend 2.5 hours optimizing my nervous system for that day, right?
Mm,
And so, in my work, showing up with a business owner in a well-regulated state and being able to model good nervous system regulation, responsiveness, having my social engagement system online as I'm interacting with them and they're sharing their challenges and their concerns and their fears and so forth. And so people pick up on that, and that's probably why somebody might hire you in the first place. If usually that kind of hiring is going to happen through some in-person interaction, and they're gonna sense something like, "Oh, this person has something," right? I
mm,
sense a
mm,
calm presence. I sense
mhm.
now I like what they're saying. They seem to have some knowledge, some wisdom, some expertise, but there's some calm presence there. And boy, I need that because I'm in the middle of the storm and I need that calm presence. And I
Yeah.
need, if nothing else, it'd be great to have this person by my side, just as, for that. So they pick up on that and, they start inquiring into that, and then, they may inquire into it directly, but also as I begin working with anyone, um, I'm gonna be and there's lots of different works I'll do. It depends on whether I'm working with their whole organization or their management team or just with them, right? But inevitably, I'm gonna start leading that owner or maybe their team through various kinds of, assessment processes, sign processes, GD um, um, exploration processes and so forth to try to figure out, what's going on in their business, what's working, what's not working, how do we optimize for scale within the given market conditions, how do we set them up for another decade or so. Probably we can't even think of in terms of decades anymore, maybe at least for the next 2 3 years of profit scalability, right? And so in doing those processes and all those different kind of tools that I would use to work with someone, those are all gonna be imbued with self-regulation skill training, right?
Mhm,
And they're gonna
mhm.
start picking up on that. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go to a CEO and say, "Well, in order for us to do this work together, you're gonna have to learn to meditate." That would probably not be an effective approach
Not
with
a
most
not a good
people.
starter.
No, but as we start doing actual business processes, things they go, "Oh, yeah, this makes sense. This is about my business. This is about my leadership. This is about strategy. This is about marketing," or this is about scale. As we're doing that, I'm going to be doing that in ways that start building in self-regulation skills and breath awareness and just presence and
Mhm.
embodiment. And, I'm
Beautiful.
going to train them, because if we're doing work with their management team, and if I'm supporting that, then I got to support them in being in front of their management team to get the buy-in to do this work. So I'm going to be coaching them around how do you show up with your management team to get the buy-in? Because first thing they're gonna wanna do is they're gonna wanna kick me out if you're bringing me in because I'm a change agent, right?
You bet.
And
Yeah.
and nobody really wants to change usually until they're desperate, right? So you have to get the buy-in for us to do this work, and I have to coach you on how to do that. Well, I'm gonna coach you how to be present, how to be fully embodied, how to inspire confidence, how to really draw a line in the sand and have people respect that. And all that's gonna involve embodiment skills and nervous system regulation skills. And at some point, it'll just emerge out of the bag. The cat will be out of the bag, and we can talk about it more directly. And then we can have conversations about how critical nervous system regulation is, and how it's completely interconnected with co-regulation, the ability to co-regulate with others. And to be an effective leader, we need to be able to co-regulate with others such that my having my social engagement system online, right, and is what invites others to bring their social engagement system online. And when two human beings or a group of human beings have their social engagement systems online, they can be really creative together. They can get great things done
Yeah.
because they're not wasting time in reactivity and fear and frustration and worrying about
Yeah,
the
or
pecking
sitting there
order.
trying to be right, right? Which the
Yeah,
brain loves
exactly.
predictability.
Yeah.
You're talking about such a powerful concept. I talk about it as that confidence is not a personality trait, it's a nervous system state. And one of the things that I'm most impressed with what I've heard, and I'm impressed with all of it, but in particular, the value and importance of modeling. This 2.5 hours in the morning is the difference between you and millions of others out there because we have mirror neurons, as you know, and we learn by watching others. So if we've got an uptight leader, we get a little anxious as well. And you coming in as that calming influence, yet you have the expertise in the background that you know what you're talking about relative to how to run a business. You're bringing such spirituality in a non-dogmatic fashion into their lives, which is difficult to argue because it feels right. And I think that's where buy-in comes from, and that's why you're so successful among, I'm sure, many things. But I wanted the audience to just kind of reflect on that a little bit and genuinely ask themselves, how are they showing up? They hit the alarm and then they're up and at 'em and they haven't had any time to regulate. So let me ask you this: what took place in your life that brought you to a point where you go, I got to stop letting this nervous system take me over, and I need to begin to start regulating it myself.
Well, that happened pretty early in my life, fortunately, and, not early enough. Um, because, I had, some struggles growing up. I grew up in a good middle-class Midwestern family, small business, had family business in the food industry, and, good values, Roman Catholic family, but we had alcoholism in the family, sadly. And, one of my parents, I never knew which one was gonna show up, Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Hyde was really scary and potentially violent, right? So this created a lot of splitting in me, and I emerged into adolescence as kind of a classic angry young man, and, big hole in my gut, and then that was the 1960s, and I just went headlong into the counterculture. It was kind of a perfect storm of what was going on in the culture and what was going on for me individually, and I just rejected a lot of things and had my involvement with substance abuse and so forth. So, and I was regulating a completely unregulated, fairly traumatized nervous system with substances for the most part and experiences and, anything I could do to fill that hole in my gut or
Sure.
get away from feeling the pain I was feeling, right?
Bet.
So that was kind of a long road. And I actually along the way though, I had actually very early on, I had discovered meditation and and these kind of things. So early on, I was beginning to do both. But I was compartmentalizing my life in a lot of ways. I'd spend a good part of the year meditation retreats and training and really be in a great place. And then I'd go back into the world and be involved in this craziness and stuff, right?
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
so it took me quite a while to untangle all that. And 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 also untangle all the us versus them stuff I had done of rejecting society and kind of, all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
uh, as well as, having a really low ceiling on what I could do in the world, right? And so before I could untangle all that, I earned my way into a federal prison sentence for drugs, a
Okay.
mandatory minimum sentence. And I was, I earned my way in there. I was over prosecuted and over sentenced, but nonetheless, I did earn my way in there. And once I ended up in prison, uh, I realized I got myself there. I realized the only way uh, through that experience, and if I was going to ever be able to create any future for myself, was to take 500% responsibility and ownership for having gotten myself in there, what I was gonna do with it. And also, my son was 9 years old when I got locked up, and I was absolutely devastated having to face the truth of, despite
Sure.
all the reasons, the excuses, and all my confusion, all the pain, the fact that I've been making some very selfish decisions, putting his life at risk, his mom's life at risk, and now the fact that he was gonna have to grow up without a dad. And actually, when I was first sentenced, I was sentenced to 30 years with no parole. I was 35 years old, and the papers said I'd be 65 before I had any releases. So I thought, I had really torched my life,
Yeah.
was abandoning my son to grow up without a dad, and way into adulthood, probably without a dad. It turned out that fortunately I was sentenced before 1987 when they had, different sentencing laws, that even with a no parole sentence, there was a lot of good time for long sentences if you stayed out of trouble. After 1987, they got rid of most of that, so now people do most of the time they're given. I also on appeal, they knocked off one count that probably should have given me a new trial, it didn't, but anyway, at least my aggregate sentence, which was from 5 counts, was reduced from 30 to 25. And so with the good time on that, I ended up serving 14. If
Oh.
they hadn't knocked off that 5 years, I would have had to serve about 18 and a half. Uh,
Mm. Mm. Even
it didn't
so, that's a
I did
long time.
serve 14 I served 14 years in prison, and, it was a huge wake-up call ending up there, and I had to face, all the selfish and boneheaded decisions I've been making and the impact that it had on my son, especially, my own
Sure.
life, how I let down my family, my spiritual teachers, and also really after spending I got involved in substance abuse recovery programming right away, and listening this was a male prison, listening week after week to one man after another talking about their life unraveling and their family's life unraveling around drugs, I finally had to face all the harm I'd been causing by being involved in drugs altogether and involved in drug trafficking. So, yeah, I had to face a lot.
Mm.
And I became radically dedicated to get any shred of negativity out of my life and take all the good I'd received from my family and my spiritual traditions and do something with it. So I became dedicated to adding as much value to that community as I could while I was there, and I taught school for 14 years. That was my day job. Um,
Okay.
I led a twice a week meditation group in the prison chapel. I was very involved, and I was a leader in the substance abuse recovery work there for those 14 years. And because this was a federal maximum security federal prison hospital where they brought prisoners from all the maximum security federal prisons there for all kinds of medical treatment, psychiatric treatment, um, and this was the height of the AIDS epidemic, with another prisoner, I had the opportunity to, and the inspiration and the opportunity to start the first hospice program in a prison anywhere in the world that we know of. And we started it in 1987, and I spent most of my free time, meals and evenings and weekends. If I wasn't at the recovery group or leading a meditation group, I was up in the hospital caring for men who were dying from AIDS and liver cancer and heart disease and all kinds of things like that. And, that was profoundly transformational work. I mean,
Sure.
you know, being in direct service to others where you put others' needs ahead of your own is one of the most profoundly transformative things
Mm.
we can do. And I was also really working on myself. I was meditating 3 hours a day. I was studying. I was working on my PhD. I was teaching school. I was really working on myself. This was like my monastery time, my ashram time. I was optimizing every minute of the day. I was For the first 8 or 9 years, only slept 4 or 5 hours a night. I couldn't do
Mm.
that now, but I was younger then. I was able to
Sure.
do it, and I was just dedicated to maximally use my time. And I also knew well, originally, I thought I was there until 65. I thought, "Basically, this is my life." Once, I figured out how the good time worked, and then once they reduced my sentence on appeal and they took off 5 years, um, then I knew I'd be just near my 50th birthday when I got out, and then I was going to get out broke, actually in debt to the federal government because the IRS assessed taxes against me for my illegally gotten gains, and
Gotcha.
I'd have a serious criminal record. I'd be 50. Well, it's not easy to start your life that way, right?
Mhm.
So I
Mm.
knew I had really had to work if I was going to survive my time. There was no guarantee of that because I was seeing men dying all around me, younger and older, my age. But if I was gonna be able if I did survive my time, but if I was gonna be able to create any life for myself beyond prison, I was really gonna have to work at it. So I did, and that really paid off because once I did get out in 1999, I've had nothing but opportunities since. I started
Mm.
a consulting business right off the bat, got out of prison. Took me 6 months to get my first client. I spoke at a I spoke at the national conference of the American Psychiatric Association just 6 months out of prison. And I've had nothing but opportunities ever since traveling the world and teaching and doing the consulting work, teaching about all these kind of things that I do. But it really was that I trained myself there. So, and a lot of that training I did, I was studying neuroscience. I was getting my PhD in psychology, and I was really learning. Uh, how to self-regulate in an incredibly challenging environment, a maximum security prison where the authorities have absolute authority. If you buck the system, you're going to be on 4-point restraints in the psych ward, being pumped full of Halidol and holds down at night, and there's a potential conflict or even violent situation with one of your fellow prisoners around every corner all the time because I lived on a unit that was designed originally for 50 medical patients, but they turned it into a general population unit. And we usually had 75 to 190 men on there, packed in there like sardines, no air conditioning in the summer. So it was a
Mm.
pressure cooker, right? And, you never knew anybody. It could be the littlest guy in there, anybody in there. Maybe they just got off the phone that they didn't make parole or the wife is taking the kids away. Anything could happen. And they're going down. They're gonna go in the hole. They don't care, and they're gonna take somebody with them, so a very dangerous environment. And you really had to be awake to survive. And so I learned, all the meditative skills and nervous system regulation skills to optimize myself to be able to actually thrive in that environment. Within a couple of years, I was thriving in there. Wasn't that I liked being there. I mean, there was a lot of things to not like about being there. There was nothing really fulfilling other than the internal fulfillment of doing the work I was doing there. But I was, really thriving in that environment in a basically cheerful mindset all the time. And so how did I do that in a maximum security prison?
Yeah.
Through self-regulation, through optimizing my own nervous system. And I think when I got out of prison and started doing consulting work right away, that's really that's one of the things I brought was who I was being, how I was being. But the other thing that I really brought was that, I was really, most people in prison are just trying to get through their time, right? And they often numb out, get into a routine, sleep as much as they can because this is downtime. It doesn't count. So anything good's out there. But I was going to be in for a long time. And I'd already had enough awareness training that I wasn't going to throw away originally 30 years of my life or even 14 years of my life after I knew that's how long it would be if I stayed out of trouble. I mean, even, the good time thing, you get in trouble, they take it away in increments. So some people do all their time anyway, right? And that could have happened to me. It's easy. It's hard to stay out of trouble in prison. So at any rate, it's an environment where I wanted to do something with my life in there. I wanted to add value. Anything you would ask the staff or authorities to do, the answer was no. And if you were audacious enough to say why, that in itself could get you in trouble. But they always had a story. Oh, we used to do that. We tried that, but somebody did it or somebody does this. So we don't. But I mean, the answer was no to everything. And you can't resist. Resistance was futile. So how do you get something done in that environment? Well,
Mhm.
I had to get very skillful.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate that my first spiritual teacher, my Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, really had a focus on skillfulness. Not so much right and wrong, although, I mean, he wasn't that he wasn't interested in morality, it was a very high morality, but it was really more about what works, what supports people, what are the causes of happiness, what is skillful in terms of moving all of us forward in a good way, and what's unskillful, what creates harm, what is actually unskillful. So I had that mindset. So I was saying, here I am, I'm in this realm of people. prisoners, all the authority, the correctional officers, the administrators, they're all human beings. So how can I approach them in such a way to get good things done? Right. And I learned a lot about people. And I
Yeah.
think that's really where I built the skills to come out and become an effective management consultant, executive coach.
Yeah, and I can thank you so much. Just what a compelling story for crying out loud. I can just see you when some leader comes up to you and goes, it's just the system, it's AI, it's in coming up being victimized by everything that they feel they have no control over. And and the experiences you had, it must be hard for you not to, you might have to bite your tongue a little bit and say, is that all you got? Is that all that's going on in your life that's holding you back? Um,
Well,
but
not
what,
one might think so, but, actually, because of my own journey and doing that journey with so many others where there was so much suffering, um, part of my journey was not only to develop these capacities, but really developing profound compassion and
hmm,
profound self-compassion and compassion for others. Just by
yeah,
and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back
no,
or
I hear
saying
you.
just being in the soup, we all underneath all the mess, we all have a heart that is our basic energy is the energy of love and compassion
Love. Yeah.
when we get to our who we really are as human beings. And so that just the more I did the work, the more that arose because I was in such a place of tremendous suffering. So, I expect when I work with business leaders that they're going to have some level of victim mindset going on. It's
Yeah.
just a human condition.
Sure.
And my role is to help model something different and help them learn a new way of approaching something. And, my book, Radical Responsibility, that's what it's all about. But I developed that philosophy, and I didn't invent that philosophy. I mean, the idea of the power of ownership, the power of choice, the fact that that's really where all our power is. And even though when we do get into a victim mindset, it's really easy to attribute when things are not going well for us. It's very easy to attribute causation to things outside of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people might agree with us. And it's not to say that the world and others don't have impact, but the only place where we have only any real power is with our own choices, right?
Hmm.
And
Amen.
very often the circumstances we find ourselves in, we had something to do with as well. But even in the case where everybody had agreed, no, you had nothing to do with that, well, still at some point, the most salient question is, okay, here I am. Maybe this is terrible. Maybe this kind of sucks or is very unjust. Okay, what am I going to do with it? Am I going to let it take me down into a victim mindset, and how much time am I going to spend? Because we're human, we're going to spend a little time, but at some point, saying, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And the minute I say, "What can I do?" I'm back in the realm of possibility 'cause there's always a million things we can do.
Yeah.
There's a million
Beautiful.
strategies we can take to approach any person, any situation, and we call that the magical radical responsibility question. What can I do? Or as a team, what can we do? And
Nice.
and that
Nice.
focuses on our choice, and if we think about that, getting our needs met, and we think a little bit long term because, in the short term, especially like in a prison situation, it might feel really good to punch somebody, right?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
might, I really want that would meet my need right now is to punch this fellow. But is that going to meet my long-term needs? No, I'm gonna end up in a hole. I may get hurt, may get killed. At the very least, I'm going to end up in a hole. I'm going to lose all my privileges, and this is cascading effects of that, right?
You bet.
So is that
Yeah.
really in my self-interest to do that? I mean, if we even operate from our own enlightened self-interest, which means kind of our long-term interest, that usually works out to be in the interest of everyone else as well, because we're all interconnected.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Whew. That was a lot to take in, and but yet you have such clarity in what you share. They can be such overwhelming situations, but you seem to see the simplicity and that one element that we all are our best version of self, and that is when we come from love. And it's a real opener in an eye, in an awakening moment. And I thank you for that story. We've got people out there, and I want to give you an opportunity here before we wrap it up that feel stuck, that have heard what you've said, but maybe don't know how to take the first step. Still kind of stuck and overwhelmed, and still find information to prove themselves right. And also, when you've given them a little tip of advice on that, also share with us what you'd like them to be aware of and how they can get a hold of you.
Mhm. Well, first of all, it's completely normal and natural for any business owner to at some point or another begin to feel victimized by the marketplace when things are not going well, the economy, or whoever they think is influencing the economy, the markets, or the administrator, whatever, or to feel victimized by the competition, or maybe what they perceive as unfair competition, or begin to feel frustrated, maybe victimized by their own employees or team. Right? I mean, this is all. There isn't a business owner in the world that hasn't gone through these things, right? The thing is to look at that, getting caught up in that kind of thinking, where does it leave me? How much does it really move me or my company forward, right? I mean, most people are gonna have the insight pretty quickly that, no, that's not gonna. But, okay, then, well, how do I shift? Well, the first thing I would say to everyone in your audience, and right now, I would say join me and just take a breath. Take a deep breath. Take another deep breath, and just feel that reset in your nervous system. Just creates a gap, a calming reset, and if you do it let's take one more and just do it with your whole body. Okay, now within that space that you've just created for yourself, keep breathing, don't stop breathing, but you can let your breath return to normal, and within that space you've created for yourself, just begin this inquiry. What does it feel like to be you right now in this moment? What does it feel like, literally, right now in this moment to feel you? Good, bad, or ugly, doesn't make any difference. Maybe you're maybe frustrated, angry, afraid, sad, good, happy, whatever it is, doesn't make any difference. What does it feel like to be you right now in this moment? Ask yourself that. What does it feel like to be me right now in this moment? And see if you can identify that feeling in terms of emotions, in terms of a neurophysiological state, like I'm really tired, or and where do you feel that in your body, right? So just go in and go, what does it feel like to be me right now in this moment? And once you have something, then ask yourself, well, what's that like? What's it like to be in that experience right now? And see what arises, right? And what's that like? And what we're doing is we're shifting into curiosity. Well, that's interesting. Well, what's that like? Right? And and how does that relate to, when I'm having these kind of thought patterns, and then I feel that way, or I find myself behaving this way, or I find myself really in a creative space able to solve problems, or when I find myself kind of experiencing kind of brain fog and feeling overwhelmed and tired, like, and scared, right? So, we go in, take a breath, go into the inquiry. What does it feel like to be me right now in this moment? And if I get something, then, okay, what's that like? And what's that like? And we're not even looking for answers yet in terms of how am I going to solve my business challenges. I'm just coming back into myself. I'm coming back into my body. And I would do this in a way that we're really, taking that breath helps bring us into the body. But as we do this inquiry, really let those questions drop all the way down to the soles of our feet and feel them in the body. All that's going to bring us more into a state of regulation, nervous system regulation, and we're gonna get curious, and that's gonna open up the neural pathways in the brain to be in a completely different brain state, right? And where we're gonna start having access to our best intelligence, our best creativity, our best insights, our life experience by being curious, right? And so we could take that, say, "What's that? Yeah, yeah, okay." And so now I feel like I'm kinda in my body and I'm in flow and I'm curious and I'm getting some insights into myself, into my own mind and my own psychology. And then, okay, how might that apply to what I'm working with right now?
Hmm,
Now from
hmm,
that place, maybe look at, whatever I might be whatever challenges I might be out trying to solve. What are the problems I'm trying to solve in my business right now, you know? But, move myself into that state first, right? And
mhm.
then and if I get to so far down the road and trying to, solve some problems or come up with some new ideas or new strategies, and I start feeling overwhelmed again, just stop, right? Take a
Mhm.
breath. What does it feel like to be me right now in this moment? And really go inside and feel it in my body. And then, okay, I guess, okay, and what's that like? And what's that like? And just keep up with that inquiry until it takes us into a state of flow and opens our mind, gets us access to our creative insight. And okay, all right, now come back to working with whatever I'm working with, right? So this, we can all just practice this moment to moment. There are lots of specific skills you can learn, and if you people want to come to HeartMind .co, that's HeartMind is our company, heartmind.co.co. There's, we just have all the most sophisticated tools in the universe for learning how to successfully self-regulate your own nervous system, optimize your nervous system and brain, and then um, and then learn how to co-regulate with others to create the ideal relationship to influence people as leaders in the ideal way. Because we're showing up in a way that helps other people feel in a good state and they're open to what we're trying to communicate, right? So we have a host of skills and trainings for all this, but everybody can start, right? And if you find yourself anytime kind of spinning out or, really stressed out or the mind's racing or you're just out of sorts, I encourage this other little micro practice I'll offer right now. Just stop for a moment and you could close your eyes while you're doing it, but if it's not appropriate to close your eyes, you can do it with your eyes open and just say to yourself, which is like a pattern interrupt. Or that's kind of masculine, stop. Or the more feminine version might be pause, right? Pause. But it creates this pattern interrupt. And then say to yourself silently, feel.
Hmm.
And just for a moment, let yourself feel whatever you're feeling, which maybe is overwhelmed, stressed out, scared, angry, frustrated, whatever you're feeling, sad, lonely, whatever you might be feeling, just let yourself feel it. Tired, both emotionally and physically. Just let yourself feel for a moment, whatever you're feeling. In fact, one of our biggest problems and challenges as individuals and as our human society and our current culture is we're all enculturated to not feel,
Hmm.
which is completely counterproductive to being able to thrive as human beings.
Hmm.
Thriving
Mhm.
and transformation is on the other side of being willing to feel. It's not through avoiding it, right? Or
Mhm.
or or numbing ourselves out with whatever, right?
Right.
So just let yourself feel, okay? And then the third, say to yourself, breathe. So you release the breath, so the breath is flowing. So you have stop or pause, feel, breathe. And then the fourth one is be. And if you
Mm.
had your eyes closed doing it where it was appropriate to do so, then as you say, be open your eyes and just let your awareness expand out into the space you're in, into the world, out to the sky. So it just stop, feel, breathe, and be. That'll create a pattern interrupt from any kind of dysregulated state you're in and help you get back to a well-regulated state where you have access to all your best. Our brain, we all have this really smart brain part, neocortex, right? Where all our beautiful judgment and skills and wisdom and intelligence and experience and expertise lies. But when we get triggered into fear and reactivity, the limbic brain is sensing, risk or danger, whether it's just perceived or real or imagined, whatever it is. And it's telling the reptilian brain, take over control because, I'm going to die. There's actually research that shows like, in a business or office or corporate setting, any business setting, there's certain needs. Well, there's lots of universal human needs we have, but some of them in the business setting have to do with status, um, uh, uh, connection. There's different ones that are, significance, um, belonging. There's research that shows when our needs, our basic needs, feel challenged or unmet, our brain doesn't know the difference between that and a saber-toothed tiger at the door.
Mm.
Right?
Mhm.
The brain
Yeah.
doesn't know the difference. We have the same neurophysiological, same neurochemical reaction as if our very life was at stake, which is why you see people erupt and act in meetings like the sky is falling when it's not, right? And so a simple exercise like that gets us out of that dysregulated fear and survival-based state back
Yeah.
into a well-regulated state where we have access to the beautifully intelligent part of our brain that can be really creative and meet challenges and solve problems. But when we're under the control of the reptilian brain, we're not very smart. I mean, how
Mm.
many people in your audience you've been emotionally triggered and then you did or said something that wasn't so smart or so cool, created a big mess that caused a lot of problems, right? We've all done that because when you're under the control of the reptilian brain, you don't have access to the smart part of your brain. And it's there by design because it keeps us alive in certain but we don't want it running our life. Most of the time,
Yeah.
we don't need to be in that state. But our
Yeah.
brain, whether we realize it or not, we're walking around with a conversation in the back of our brain. I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna start to this, I'm gonna start to that, I'm gonna be alone. That's going on back. It's genetic. It goes back millions of years, right? And but we can develop the brain that has the neuronal resilience to override that and not have that running the show unless it's absolutely necessary.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That was a wonderful opportunity to invest time with you. And we got so many nuggets. You're a blessing. And every one of those experiences you've had in your life, I know you wouldn't change any of them, or you wouldn't be where you are and who you are now.
Absolutely right.
Um, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in. And always remember, wherever you are is exactly where you need to be. And as you've heard from Fleet, it's just a matter of choice. And make those choices. And sometimes you're going to have to take the deep breaths. Sometimes you're going to have to ask how you feel. And you want to be able to go through that process, because when the reptilian brain takes over, it shuts down the frontal lobes, and you're in no danger of doing what's in best interest of yourself and others. So you gave us such great insight into that. And I thank you for that, my friend.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I want you to stay tuned and see who we're going to be talking with on our next opportunity together. And have a most remarkable day. And we will see you soon. Thank you all.